I'm Simon from Kent Libraries, and this is On the Books, the library show born out of lockdown that talks about all things written word, thoughts, ideas, inspirations, and much, much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Today I have with me Zoe Antoniades, who is a writer, works in creative projects, has been a teacher, deals with children's literature, and has kindly joined us here at Canterbury Library to have a little bit of a chat about writing in general and just the spoken and written word. So, hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, yes, getting used to the world of Zoom and sharing my love of books through the power of the screen. So it's great to meet our friends in Kent today.
It's lovely to have you on. I think new technology has been great for allowing us to reach out further than we ever have done before. So it's always fun to try and reach new audiences in new ways. I like to start by asking sort of a simple question that's never easy to answer. What inspired you to write?
Actually, I find that an easy one to answer because I loved reading, and reading and writing go together hugely. And someone once said, reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out. So I first became a reader at the age of 4 or 5, and I just remembered books being magical. I just loved the feel of a book and where it took you as soon as you turned a page. And from such a young age, I ask a lot of children I work with, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they don't always know at the age of 5 or even 10. But from the age of 5, I knew I wanted to be a writer because I loved reading and I just wanted to be part of that world of books. So, and I was quite good at writing at school, which kind of confirmed a bit more. This is something I can do. This is something I might want to do more with. I think as I got older, I looked at maybe taking the writing into journalism and the world of non-fiction. Worked with school magazines, things like that, and even had a short time working in TV journalism after I finished university. But I kind of returned to the world of fiction. I think fiction is more where my passion lies, going into imagined worlds as well as real ones.
Yeah, but you can tell some real truths with fiction. Fiction does allow you to show some very interesting things.
Well, yeah, I mean, my new book, Callie and Jimmy, which is coming out just in September, has a lot of truth in it, but it is fiction, but it's about a brother and a sister who are twins. I'm not a twin,
Yep.
But I had a brother who was very close to me in age. We were only 11 months apart, so it seemed like we were in each other's pockets. So a lot of the relationship between brother and sister feelings come through this from real life. This boy Jimmy is quite lively and he's got ADHD and he's a bit funny and gets into trouble a lot, but he's very likable as well. But in that way he's different to my brother, because my brother was quite gentle and quite cool. So yeah, you use real life in your writing all the time, but then you fictionalize it to make it more of a story.
Where do you find inspiration to write?
Lots of ways. I can see in the background you've got some of my earlier books, which are from working together with children, running creative writing workshops. So one way of getting my ideas is stealing them from children, sharing them with children. So I will start with maybe just a scene idea, an image from, even if it's the internet, or I might say to the children, where shall we set the story? So often I start with a setting, because then if you say you want to set it on a planet, you're immediately bringing then in new characters like aliens. Or if you say you want to set it in a forest, you're kind of introducing maybe pixies and elves or knights. So a setting often inspires my ideas. And then I like collaboratively sharing ideas, bouncing ideas together with children off each other. So I like chatting about story ideas, but then I like to go away quite quietly and get on with it on my own as well.
Get on with it on your own.
So then the ideas just start coming from nowhere sometimes, like you've got lots of story. Well, I kind of imagine like there's a cloud around you with lots of ideas, and you just pulling from those. So Callie and Jimmy, I have talked to some children I work with for a few ideas. I've said, what would you like to see Callie and Jimmy do next?
Yeah.
But mostly these ideas are from life experiences a little bit, but then develop. They kind of just grow like plants as you're writing, and that's my favourite part of writing, when I'm sort of immersed in it. I like to go away and be somewhere very quiet, and it's hard sometimes getting started, as it is for children who are writing as well. It's no different for adults. That getting started bit can be a bit like, oh, come on, let's do this. But then my favourite part is when you're really in the zone and whole brand new bits of story are just coming from nowhere, and you think, oh, that's good, and I haven't planned it at all. So it's almost like someone else is helping me write from somewhere, some other sphere or dimension. I don't feel like I'm almost doing it all by myself at all.
That makes sense. I mean, I remember reading another author who said something similar, that his characters in the end started to write themselves. But once they found a voice, and he was almost channeling it. So
and it's great when that happens, because it doesn't feel as hard. It feels more natural, and like something's helping you with this process.
You mentioned about getting started. I'm someone who dreads the blank white page or the blank screen. So do you have any advice to anyone who's sitting there staring at one going, how do I begin?
Yeah. How do I begin? I have a basic idea, and then I think on it for a while. Some of my writing friends really plan thoroughly. They've got whole walls full of maps and post-it notes and all sorts of things going on. I prefer it to be a bit more organic, or it's a bit less fun. Callie and Jimmy, I started, actually an editor asked me to give it a try.
Right.
She said, I'd like a story about twins. And she knew I was Greek, and she said, maybe make them a bit Greek. So we brought, they're half Greek, because these days, like, my sister's married a Irish man. So these are a bit like my niece and nephew's generation. The Greek granny would be fun to bring in, because she will add a bit more Greekness to the story, because these days, second or third generation children with parents from other countries are, more British than belonging to their country. So to bring the Greekness in, we brought the granny. So I thought, so ideas sometimes come, again, collaboratively. From scratch, I would say, especially if we're giving advice to children, like all these books, I started with the story mountain. Just a really 5-step simple plan. So we're not bogged down with planning, because I know children like to get into writing. But basically, the first step of any story is introduce characters and set a scene. So I like to start with the scene personally. So I say to, like, think of any scene you like setting. What would you like? A classroom, a library, a spaceship, a forest, a park, a city, a busy street, anything you like, and then put a character in there, and then we say, what character could you have? A spaceman, or a teacher, or a child, or a parent, or I don't know, a hobbit. So you think of your character, and once you've got a character in a setting, you've already started, I think. The next step we use on the story mountain is that story goal. So then just say, where do I want my character to go next? So I put them in a setting. Where do they want to go next? But really importantly, why? So why? That's their story goal at the end of the day. And then children are really good at remembering the third step on the mountain, the top part, which is the problem. So this character has a story goal. You don't want to allow them to achieve it too quickly. If they just get their goal, the story's over at step 2 and it's finished. So give them a problem, an obstacle, some conflict to get in the way of that goal. Then you've already got more than half a story, so your ideas are full already. And then you need to solve that problem because you don't want to leave them hanging on the top of the mountain in trouble. And then your story's kind of finished. But just to give it, children especially find it hard to write a good ending. And even my editors asked me several times to rewrite my endings to make them extra good, because endings, I think, are really important as much as the beginnings. So I tell the children to try and link their ending back to somewhere else on the story mountain. So where were they at the beginning? How about where are they at the end? Where were they going? Where did they get to? What was their story goal? Did they achieve their story goal? But most of all, just really simply end on a feeling, end on a reflection. How do they feel at the end? And it feels finished. So 5 really simple steps. And usually by then, my children are no longer stuck. They are like, well, I've got a story now, just got to write it.
That's really helpful. That's really, really helpful.
I didn't make it up, actually. And another ancient Greek made that up, called Aristotle. It's called the Aristotelian arc. So, but I simplified it along with some other good teachers who have influenced me to simplify the ideas of those 5 steps to make sense to us all.
And as soon as something like that makes sense, you can produce all sorts of wonderful things. That's
just
fantastic.
Hang things off it. Yeah, you hang things off those 5 hooks, and then you embellish as you write. The fun part is in the writing, isn't it?
So I have to ask then. I mean, you talk so passionately about writing and everything like that. Where did your love of the written word come from?
I think I was lucky. It was one of my natural talents and interests. Just like some children are born really good at sport, or really good at art. I mean, our illustrator Katie Kear, she adds so much to this book with her drawing. I cannot draw or illustrate very well at all. I don't like to say can't do at all, because that's not good attitude, but I'm not a natural illustrator. Some people are amazing at baking, aren't they? So I think I was naturally attracted to words and language and just the art of it all. So it may have been, I might have been slightly born with it. I've got quite an artistic family. They're quite musical, my family as well. But just the more I read, the more I loved. And it might be a cliche, but one of the people's writing that I most made me fall in love with language was the great Shakespeare.
I don't think that's a cliche. I like that answer. That's a good answer.
I was scared of Shakespeare for many years until I was at least 14. I thought, this is scary, really hard language. It doesn't even sound like English. It's poetry, which I'm not quite great at understanding either. And I had this fantastic teacher, Mrs. Colbert, and she brought Shakespeare to life with Romeo and Juliet. And she started just by telling us the story. And then we put the words to the story, and it just, the older I get, the more I understand Shakespeare, and just the more I love it. There's so much in there.
I found Shakespeare was accessible the moment I saw it. So I was introduced to it in the classroom in a book, and it didn't make much sense. And then I had, like you, I had a teacher that was one of those inspirational teachers that did something a bit more, and he just acted it, and then all of a sudden Shakespeare came alive.
Yeah, because it's put the words from the page onto the stage. It's written to be performed, isn't it? Even if it's just recorded and vocalized. But yeah, when I work with older pupils, sometimes I work with children doing their GCSEs. If they're studying Macbeth, I say, we have to go and see Macbeth. You've got to see Macbeth. And that's one of the best ones as well. So I love language. I love it when it's cleverly done. I love some of the more. I like reading. Obviously, I'm a children's writer, but I love reading grown-ups writing. And I love the current Booker Prize winner Bernadine Evaristo. I love the way she experiments with styles and structures, but great stories at the end of the day.
So you say you read widely, and I think everyone should read widely. Personally, I work in a library. I would think that. However, I find that there is always a moment, or there is a book or several books that something goes click, it changes your life. Do you have a book like that changed your
Oh,
life? Hard question.
I think the ones that change my life is that they're just so well written that they make me just want to be a writer too and love language even more. And probably the first one I read, well, actually, no, there's three. Am I allowed
Yep.
to say three?
Yeah, of course.
So obviously the ones that changed my life first would have been children's books.
Yeah.
So two that involved portals to other worlds, because I'm writing kind of there's no magic in this.
Yeah.
It's all fun and it's about relationships, getting on with people and how people get on well with each other and solving problems, that sort of thing. But I loved reading fantasy, where you went to other worlds. So my two favourites, might guess, was the Enid Blyton's
Yep.
Faraway Tree. Just I loved. We used to walk to school through a park, and there was a big tall tree. And I used to really wish that was the Faraway Tree. And I also loved C.S. Lewis's Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Yeah. That first time she goes, the back of the wardrobe disappears, and the crunching snow and the fur coats turn to trees. I mean, how amazing. I would have loved to have gone on adventures like that. So those both really changed my world as a child, that made me want to read more books, to sort of escape to other places. As we didn't have as many TV channels in those days.
No.
We only had 3, and they only put children's TV on at a certain time. So there wasn't Netflix, YouTube, any of those things. So I had books for escapism.
Book for escape.
And then my third, am I allowed to say my third one?
Yeah, that's your third one. Please tell me
My
your
third one that changed my life, which made me think, wow, writing can be really clever and amazing, was Roald Dahl.
Ah.
I was in year 4, what's now called year 4, and I picked up the Twits, and there was just something about the beard description, and just it was so funny. It was just something about Roald Dahl's writing style. It was quirky, and it was. I still don't think I've come across another writer like him. I know some people like to think they might be like the covers of their books might look a bit like his books, but then I just haven't met a writer that's anything of his caliber. He's so unique still. I think the voice of his writing. So,
it will last. I think that will carry on and on and on. Yeah, I'm very much the same.
It's and as a child opening the Twits, and then after that I just read every Roald Dahl book. I was like, more please. It's just something about the way he writes. I'm a big fan.
So that leads me quite nicely onto my next question, actually. If you could have if there was one book you wish you had written or could have written, what would that be?
I don't like to think I'd be worthy. But my favourite, probably, I liked, of the Roald Dahls, I'd say Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I love it because I like, and although that's a bit more quirky, even like things like Callie and Jimmy, I like stories where the characters come through, and the characters, the underdog kind of wins in the end, and I like that sort of battle of personalities, and just looking at different characters, how they journey. And so Charlie's the underdog, but he gets what he wants with his magic as well. So yeah, and Narnia as well, and all the whole. I read all 7 Chronicles of Narnia when I was a bit older, because actually they're quite smart. And I think they're worth reading as a young adult, because I just thought it was very clever what he did, the way he connected all 7, although then they don't seem as connected. They're not like the 7 Harry Potter books that really do go from one to the next as sequels that make one whole big story. The 7 Chronicles of Narnia are their individual books, but what connects them is the universe around them, isn't it? And I thought that was very, very clever. So if I could ever write anything like that, extremely impressed with myself. I don't think it's my style or genre, though, to write. It's certainly something I love to read, but I don't think it's my own.
Fair enough. Speaking of your own style and genre, the voices, the voices collection, the Invincible Voices collection. What was the genesis for that? Was it the workshops, or where did that idea come from?
It came from, actually, I did a sort of prototype many years before when I was teaching in a school. The Polka Theatre came to us, and they were doing a project with lots of different schools, and it was actually like a writing project more than a theatre project, and it was called Writing the World. And they took a country each year, and you could write any story you liked about, based with the country at heart. So one year it was Brazil. So I worked with about 20 children, and we created stories just like we do with Invincible Voices, collaboratively. They went away then and wrote them by themselves, and then I edited them together through shared writing afterwards. So these stories were good. A couple of them got performed at the theatre. So the theatre then select a few, and a real writer, I think it was Marcus Cedric that year, came onto the stage and he read some of the stories out. And I thought, and this is nice, the children got a certificate and we had our event at the theatre, but I thought these stories are really more than that. I tell you what, I'll photocopy them and put them in a book so the children can take them home. Yeah. But then I thought that's a lot of photocopying. Let's see about, or is there a more efficient way of doing that, a more special way of doing that? So I discovered self-publishing that way. Yeah. I found some book companies where you didn't have to be a famous writer, you just pay for the printing and the putting together costs. Yeah. So we as a school printed the stories in a smart book that looked a lot like this, and we called it Shared Voices, I think. But that was just a one-off. And then when I moved from working directly in schools, I still visit schools a lot, which I enjoy, but I don't stay in one school now as a teacher. So I became a tutor working from home so that I could have more time to do my own writing. Mm-hmm. But I also kept teaching through running creative writing workshops. So I'd work together with the children, planning stories and sharing ideas and writing together. And I thought, and I said to them, we'll do this for a book. Yeah. So it gave the writing even more of a purpose. So they were really excited to write something, knowing it would make it into real print. I also had a website going because it would take a good year for each of these, really. Yeah. So I couldn't do everybody's story that way. So I also had a website where we could just publish digitally children's stories. So there's lots of ways to write for a purpose now and to get the writing out there. So yeah, we did four collections, and children like to read them as well, even if they're not the children who wrote the stories. Children, when I go around schools, they all want to buy a copy at home time as well, because they love reading stories by other children. Yes, because they've got the children's ideas in them, and they've got the children's heart in them. So
I think we undersell children's ideas. We should pay more attention. They have
great ideas. They need a bit of help structuring them, channeling them, and polishing them up. Yeah. But the ideas are as good as any grown-ups. In fact, better, because they're less restricted.
Where do we learn that we can't be? Somewhere down the line, we stop learning to be creative, don't we? Some people do. Yeah.
I think people just have, as you get older, you got a few more rules and day-to-day things to do, and your head space gets filled up a bit more with boring, ordinary things like paying bills, driving a car. So children are freer, I think.
In this age, which is undoubtedly digital, ironically because we're doing it like this, where do you think the written word has place now in the realm of devices and social media? Do you think it still has a place, or do we have to fight for that place? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it's not quite social media, but when the Kindle thing came out, people were worried that the good hard copy of the book would die out. But I've heard, I don't know for sure, I haven't done the science, I've heard something like 50% children like it, about 50-50. They still want the real hard copy as well as to hold a Kindle. And I think that then translates to any screen. Looking at text on a screen or video on a screen, it's still different to the feel of a real book. I like going backwards and forwards through the book a bit, but if I sort of thinking, oh, what did that character do again? Who was that one's mum? And popping back in. I don't know, children still love to clutch a book, especially if they've met the author and the author signs that book. There's something a bit different about a hard copy of text to a digital text. Although we can't visit libraries and bookshops as easily now as we could in the past, we're starting to be able to again, which is great. But we can also order online, we can order from Hive, and we get our book in our home, and we can still sit in our comfy armchair and read a book rather than look at a screen. So books are still accessible. But I'm on social media a lot. I think there's a place for social media. It's blogging, it's a way of getting your voice out there. When I do talks in schools now and children ask me, how can I be a writer? How can I get published? I don't just include get yourself an agent and an editor and a publisher and get yourself a paperback book done. On my list of ways to be a writer, I've included school magazines, school newsletter, which are all often digitalised. I've included get yourself a WordPress website if you're a bit older, and you can blog that way. I'm too old to know what the young people's social media is. I certainly blog through Facebook and Twitter. That's a blogging medium. I know the younger audiences use more video blogging, but it's still the spoken word, and you still got to plan and organise what words come out and how they come out. So it is writing in a way.
Yes.
Verbally writing it. So, I mean, and if I'm doing a YouTube video that I want people to really take seriously, I would probably write something first before I start doing it.
You'd script it.
Or I've done some recordings of me reading from my books on YouTube. So there's text and screen coming together because I'm reading from the text. Another thing that's nice with Zoom as well, I have the shared screen. So you can share your screen, and so there's just a little picture of me in the corner, but then I've got the whole text up on the screen, and we can underline things, we can add to it, I can put word up on the screen and write together with children. They can shout out their ideas and I can write on the screen in front of them. So
so it's a real amalgamation.
You combine now writing with visuals, and I love that. I mean, I'm a visual person. It's great to put the two mediums together.
That's fantastic. So I've noticed that behind you, your bookshelf looks immaculately neat.
I'm a bit tidy. I didn't do it especially for Zoom. I'm quite a tidy person. I have strategically placed Callie and Jimmy there. So.
Of course.
And some of my favourite authors as well are up there. But I do kind of keep them in alphabetical order.
Alphabetical order. So I was going to ask in which way do you organise it in alphabetical order? Makes sense. Working in a library, we have to organise by genre, but yes. So you do organise yourself. I have a
bit of genre in that I've got all my adult books, my grown-up books in the back in the living room. My children's books are here, and my non-fiction books are over there. So I've got a slight categorisation as well. I'm very organised. It's unusual then that I'm not one of those writers who plans like my friend with all the post-it notes on the wall, because I don't like to write in that way at all. I'm not meticulous with planning of my stories, but I'm meticulous with keeping everything tidy around me so that I've nothing bothering my head while I'm writing. Because if that bookshelf was all crooked, I'd be worrying about that instead of my words.
Absolutely distracting. Well, that makes sense. I wish my bookshelves were like yours. Let's just put it that way.
I do like a tidy bookshelf. And I can find what I need as well. Because I'm a mini library here. I lend my books out to my children that I
Right.
work with. And so if they say, oh, have you got Percy Jackson? I know I can go to R for Riordan and pick it out.
Pick it out.
I
That
can
makes
find my Percy
absolutely
Jackson
sense. Currently, and quite rightly so, especially with the lockdown and COVID, and in general, we've had a much greater awareness of mental health, the importance of mental health and looking after ourselves, especially in children. So I'm sort of asking writers where they think reading and writing fits in with good mental health, or can it help good mental health?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when I was younger, my parents got divorced, and that was a troubling time, unsettling time for me. So I found writing a diary was a great way to keep my mind focused, or just let out my ideas and feelings in a diary. So I always think diary writing is a great way to express yourself and support with mental health. How else does writing help with that? With reading stories that are relatable. So I know, things like Jacqueline Wilson stories that connect with the real world. Or I think you've got there the boy at the back of the class.
Yeah.
That's helps children understand refugees and their plight, difficult situations. And although the readers might not have been a refugee, they can connect with all the family issues, or the sense of loneliness or despair, and how you overcome that. So reading about other people's experiences that you can relate to. I wrote, and children it's starting to come out in their creative writing as well, the fictionalized versions. And that's a way of, I think, pouring it out without being too personal, but expressing your feelings and trying to organize the chaos that's in your head a little bit more tidily on the page, to just structure that. So we've been involved in a couple of competitions during lockdown. One was a poetry competition for the Chiswick Book Festival, and the ideas from COVID were starting to come out in the poetry, but in very sweet ways, just things like, quarantine is not all bad, you get to spend time with mum and dad. But then also there were some really poignant lines. I think the children didn't even try hard to write them, they just came out, and they were really good to read, as well as probably for the child to write.
That's fantastic. I pretty much agree with pretty much everything you've said, actually, about a safe space or somewhere to escape to, or just empathize with or relate to. That's brilliant. Do you have any memories, or where did your experiences of public libraries? What's your experience?
Yeah, I really did. I loved it. One was the school library, and you got to get out the classroom, go somewhere different, and choose a book for the week. And there's something about the crackle of the pages, and I think they go covered in plastic a lot as well. And I loved that, getting it stamped. We had them stamped, the old stamps and the slips. My local library, as a child, mum used to take us, and I used to just love going through the picture books. I remember choosing picture books a lot, Megan Morgan. The great thing about the library, I'm lucky, I just, one of the main things I buy is books for pleasure. So I have a lot of books in my home, but I know a lot of people can't afford to always have books of their own to buy every single time they want a new book. So what better place to get one than from a library? So as a child, you read so much, especially picture books. You can't buy 10 picture books a week. No. So you were able to go and get as many books as you liked. So I loved that. And then I got older, I used Chiswick Library a lot. Liked using that. Had a nice atmosphere. It was a nice place to go and work as well sometimes, to go and do your homework. And I like being
do that today.
You have people come in to work.
Still do that. Yeah.
Makes a change of scene, and there's something peaceful about it, and just the smell of the books around you makes you feel a bit more studious. It's a good zone to be in.
So you mentioned earlier that one of the people that inspired you was Shakespeare, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. But if there was if there are any other authors that inspire you as a creative person?
My favourite adult writers, and it does relate to Callie and Jimmy a bit, because they're all writers who talk about families and relationships and how people get on. So I love Anne Tyler,
Right.
and I like Pat Barker. I quite like historical fiction. Actually, I don't write it a lot, but who else are my favourite authors? Margaret Atwood.
Yes.
So I've got more. I'm reading Elizabeth Strout a lot at the moment, who wrote Olive Kitteridge, and she writes about families and parents and relationships to their children and that sort of thing. I like those sort of family drama type books. Probably another thing that influences me, though, as a writer, professionals that influence me are comedians.
Right.
I like comedians who write well.
Yeah.
So I loved Victoria Wood growing up. And,
yes.
and I like all the contemporary comedians that you might see on Mock the Week, those kind of things. I think they influence me to like look at the world and laugh at it a little bit, not take it too seriously sometimes.
Well, I think a comedian and a writer aren't all that dissimilar, because they think very, very carefully about what they're actually saying, although they make it look effortless. And I suppose it's the same with the writer.
Writers, yeah.
When you write, when you read what's been written, it seems like it's so effortless, but obviously the amount of work that goes into the thinking that goes behind the shaping that goes into writing, it's all very precisely thought about. And
they tell stories as well.
I suppose I really should ask, what's next for you? So you've got Callie and Jimmy, Twins in Trouble, out in September, isn't it?
September.
And I believe there's one due after that later on?
So it's a series.
Right.
So we've got 2 books ready to go so far. Well, nearly ready to go. This one's coming out in September. And then Callie and Jimmy Twintastic is coming out in... It was February. I think it's been moved to April now, which is fine. So in the book, there are 4 stories.
Right.
So they're 4 long short stories.
Okay.
And they've all really illustrated as well, lots of illustrations in there, so they're really great to read. They are a double act actually with the illustrator myself. She brings something extra to the books that wouldn't be there without her illustrations. So
how does that work with the illustrations? Do you have long conversations?
That was unusual. Like my first time working with an illustrator, really. All the Invincible Voices, I just asked the children to illustrate, and because I self-published these, I just put the children's illustrations in. But this, because it's with a really cool posh publishing company, Andersen Press, they're a big team. It's my first time really working with a big team like that. The editor really helped me make the stories as smart as they can be. She's Charlie Shepherd. She's brilliant. And then the publishing company chose an illustrator from an agency that they'd had their eye on already, and they used this agency for lots of illustrators. So they said to me, "We found this illustrator, Katie Kear. She looks great. Shall we have her for Callie and Jimmy?" So I would have a bit of a choice. I could have said no if I didn't like the style of her work, but it was very unlikely that I would say no.
Yeah.
Especially when I saw her work, it was excellent. So the publishing house chose the illustrator, and then where the editor works closely with me on the text. There's an art director type of person who works closely with the illustrator on what pictures should go in the book and where they should go. Right. So I had to sort of trust the illustrator a lot, really, to read the text and be faithful to the text. I did send her some photos of me and my brother when we were little, and my sister, because the girl's got my sister's hair. She's definitely got my sister Stella's hair from when she was a kid, the triangle shape. So I sent a few photos just for a bit of inspiration. And the granny character at first didn't look very Greek, because I hadn't sent any photos of grannies. Let me find a good picture of the granny. There's a bit of one there.
Yep, okay.
I don't know if I, but even there she is. She's got.
Yeah.
She's a real favourite character of a lot of the children who read this. The granny didn't come out right first time. So first they sent me just some pictures of the main characters, and they said, "Do you like the look of these?" Callie and Jimmy were like, "Spot on. I wouldn't have changed a thing." And then the granny wasn't quite right, so we sent the granny backwards and forwards a few times. So I didn't actually talk directly with the illustrator. We went through the art director.
Yeah.
But then I thought, this illustrator's doing such an amazing job, and she's so good. And when she got the text, she turned the scenes to exactly how I imagined them. So she must have really read the text closely. And I was really impressed with that. And she added humour to the stories, made them even funnier through her drawings. Like you were chuckling at Granny. It's just, she's really funny, the illustrator. She puts humour in. So I didn't have to say very much. And then, but I thought, she's so good. I haven't met this person. I haven't spoken to her directly at all. So I found her on Instagram and Twitter. So we sent each other some messages that way. But I don't really instruct her or anything through that.
It's an area that I've, obviously we're dealing with the children's library and we see all the picture books and it's an area that I've never really, obviously illustrations must go hand in hand with the words, but I've never understood the process or so that's really enlightening. Thank you.
I mean, some illustrators are like, they write as well, like Krista Cowell illustrates her own books. I didn't really understand this process at all either till I started working with Katie Kear. And I think I was a bit scared to say anything at first because I didn't want to upset anybody. But I am allowed to make some changes. I'm always given the proofs in advance and I can circle things. I can say, oh, you know, he's meant to have, there's a Halloween story like he hasn't got furry hands and furry feet for the werewolf. And he needed to have furry feet because they get soggy in the rain and it's
right.
I could say, like, could you put the furry feet on, please? But I can't change whole pictures and go, oh, I don't want one of that.
I suppose we need to kind of wrap it up there. But Zoe, thank you very much for agreeing to come on and be one of our interviewees. It's been really interesting to listen to what you've had to say. I'm sure our audience will absolutely love it. And thank you once again.
Thanks for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our interview with Zoe Antoniades. Her new book, Callie and Jimmy, Twins in Trouble, is available now. It can be found in Kent Libraries and all good bookshops. For more information on our digital services and our offer, visit kent.gov.uk/libraries or follow the link below. To see more what we're up to in terms of social media, follow us on our Facebook page, also linked below. Thank you for watching. I'm Simon, and goodbye.